Greetings and welcome back to Room 303, Senior English A. We are now in Unit 4, Seeing Things New. I'm on page 412, Visionaries and Skeptics. We want to make sure that you're familiar with the essential question on 413. Why are both vision and disillusion necessary? And then I want you to work through pages 414, the unit goals, and make sure you're familiar with the vocabulary on 415, engender, transformation, incorporate, artifice, and extricable. We're now going to turn to the launch text on page 416. This is a narrative model. In this selection is an example of a reflective narrative. You want to circle that term. A type of writing in which an author tells a true story about his or her own life and explores its meaning. You're going to write in this mode for the performance-based assessment at the end of this unit. As you read Ruth Gruber's The Assignment of My Life, notice how the writer uses dialogue and reflection to develop her story. Mark details that answer this question: how does the writer feel about her experiences? We'll read now with professional reader, paying close attention and taking notes for the 8 paragraphs of this essay.
The Assignment of My Life by Ruth Gruber. I was born 100 years ago in Brooklyn's Williamsburg neighborhood in 1911. I always loved words. In the first grade, I would listen to my beautiful African-American teacher read poetry. She was the only teacher I had in elementary school who was not Irish or Jewish, and her soft voice reading poetry was like music. I was mesmerized. Words, written, spoken, waking me in full sentences from my sleep, became the fuel that drove me. That's when I made up my mind that my life would be about writing. As a young girl, I was always restless and in a hurry. I went to NYU and finished in 3 years. My English professor sent my essays to The Atlantic, Harper's, and elsewhere. They all got rejected, but with lovely letters. After NYU in 1931, just as Hitler was rising to power, I went to Germany for a 1-year fellowship at the University of Cologne. My professors encouraged me to get a PhD in writing, but how could I do it in 1 year? The head of the English department, Professor Herbert Schuffler, said, "It's never been done before, but maybe you can do it." I passed my orals, wrote my thesis on a then relatively unknown British writer named Virginia Woolf, and at 20 years old, the New York Times called me the youngest PhD in the world. When I came home, there weren't a lot of jobs in journalism, certainly not for young women. I started sending articles and had enough rejections to cover my bedroom walls. If I had ever taken a course in journalism, I would have known that you should write what you know. Eventually, I decided to write an article about what I did know, my home of Brooklyn, and the New York Times bought it. That was really the beginning of my life. I became a special foreign correspondent for the New York Herald Tribune. I reported stories from Alaska, the Soviet Arctic, and elsewhere. I left journalism for a period during World War II to take a job as special assistant to the Secretary of the Interior, Harold Ickes. In 1944, he assigned me on a secret mission to be an escort for nearly 1,000 Jewish refugees from Italy to the United States aboard a military ship called the Henry Gibbons. I was made a simulated general so that if I was captured by the Nazis, they wouldn't kill me. That was according to the laws of the Geneva Convention. I spent 2 weeks on this hot, crowded ship. We were hunted by Nazi seaplanes and U-boats. I talked to many of the refugees. I told them they needed to tell me their stories of persecution. Many of them said, "How can we tell you? You're a young woman and what they did to us was so obscene that you just don't want to know about it." And I, in turn, responded that they were witnesses to history, and they had to help America learn the truth about Hitler's atrocities. So they talked, and I listened, and I took down in longhand everything they told me. The refugees were brought to and held at a decommissioned military base in Oswego, New York, and decades later, at a 1999 reunion of the refugees in Oswego, several people said, "We know now what happened to many of us former refugees, but we don't know what happened to you." I was 88 at the time of the reunion, and when I looked back at that experience, as well as at more than a half-century of journalism, I realized that my involvement with the Oswego refugees was the defining moment of my life. My time on that ship made me aware that as a journalist, I would always be both witness and participant. I learned that I must live a story to write it. And I began to live the Oswego story the moment I climbed aboard the Henry Gibbons and met the survivors, many still wearing their striped concentration camp pajamas with newspapers wrapped around their bare feet. Because of them and those we lost, I vowed I would fight with every cell in my body to help rescue Jews in danger. After that experience, I would continue to be a journalist, photographer, and book author. But from that moment on, inextricably, my life would be about rescue and survival.
Now, the power of this brief essay, The Assignment of My Life, is that Gruber will tell us several important things about herself and the moments in her life that really were the most significant. Of course, it's remarkable that she's writing a dissertation on Virginia Woolf, so sacred in 303 for us. We'll have more to say about that later when we meet Virginia Woolf in our 20th century study. The youngest PhD in the world. But the thing I want to point out in paragraph 3, and this is important for us as young writers and as young students, is that she had to come to terms with the fact early on in her life of the power of rejection. It will be in your life often the rejections that will define you, because in those moments, as we have said many times in our discussions about the Odyssey, you're forced to ask not why did this happen to me, but rather why did this happen for me? That is to say, Gruber has this ability to remind us that we have to make sure we never consider ourselves victims of our circumstance, but rather students of our circumstance. We have to learn from those experiences. Of course, her experience on the Henry Gibbons, the ship, that allows her to be able to see the horrific atrocities that are involved, will forever change her life. And even at 88, she's still involved. And then, as she says at the very first line of this essay, 100 years ago, she's lived a full life, a powerful life. My time on that ship, paragraph 8, made me aware that as a journalist, and I would say this is true as students, I would be always both witness and participant. I learned that I must live a story to write it. What a compelling idea. Let's turn now to our Unit 4 study, and we will, on page 418, summarize briefly the assignment of my life. And then on page 419, we're wanting you to write down to this problem. When can the way we look at things lead to growth? And when can it hold us back? It's a beautiful question, and I think it's a powerful question for our Unit 4 study. All right, guys, let's go to work. We'll enjoy our Unit 4 study. Thank you.